very much. Good to see some familiar faces. I appreciate y'all having me back again. And hopefully, last time we shared something that made Brooke pick up the phone and call us to come back. So thank you so much. We're going to be talking about some different things. Last time was blood sugar in the brain, and we learned a bunch about that. Hopefully, some people had some good takeaways there, and we're able to put some of that into good use. Every little bit helps. There's nothing you're going to learn in any one day that's going to change your life, but every little bit over time will make a big, big difference. So, again, my name is Dr. Michael Trayford. Functional neurology is my business. Functional medicine as well. So, doing things from, when I say functional is a buzzword, kind of like sustainable, green, etc. Nobody even knows what these words mean anymore. But basically, we're treating function of the nervous system, function of physiology. We're looking to do things to help people, help their brains work better is what it comes down to. All kinds of ways to approach that, but what we're here to talk about today is exercise and your brain. Exercise is a huge component. I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that exercise is probably one of the most important things with regard to brain function, to healthy brain function. It has a lot to do with the way you utilize blood sugar, like we talked about last time. It has a lot to do with growing new nerve cells, sustaining that new nerve cell growth, making connections in the brain. We'll talk about some of those details. I don't want to bog you down with physiology, but I can provide you some resources to help you understand that. But there is a whole science behind exercise in the brain. There was a great book written, I'll talk about that a couple of times, called Spark. Has anybody read that? A great book. Is on the New York Times bestseller list, so it's a lay read, so to speak, and it was written by, I think his name is John Ratey. The last name is Ratey. He's a biologist from Harvard, and it's all about what different types of exercise do for your brain. So we're going to try to break it down in a nutshell and see what we can learn about how exercise impacts your brain. So here we go. Exercise, people exercise for different reasons. Everybody has a reason. I'm sure if we can ask in here, does anybody care to share why they exercise? Any hands? Or does anybody in here exercise? I'm sure you do. So why do you exercise?
So I can eat more dessert.
So you can eat more dessert. That's a good one that I did not have on the list here, but I'll put that on. Any others?
It just helps you with your well-being.
Well-being, excellent, excellent. Any others?
Maintaining weight.
Maintaining weight, okay. So we've got some great ideas. People do it to feel better. They do it to stay fit, get that beach body. When do people start working out? Before the clothes get a little bit thinner. Before they, obviously in winter people tend to put on weight because they're covered up a little bit more. So sometimes it is for vanity purposes. Other times it's for well-being. Other times it's so you can eat more. I'm in your camp right there. I like to exercise so I can eat more. But the brain has a big part to do with it as well. Sports performance, obviously. Doctors said too. How many people have an event or some numbers creep up in the labs, and then you've got to, unless you want to hit that big event. Others, wife or husband wants you to. That happens a lot as well. And stress relief, that's another one, and that's probably one of the most important things this day and age. I have all kinds of things walking through my front door. I have a fellow right now from Tennessee in this week and has a seizure disorder entirely related to stress. If anybody's heard of this, most seizure disorders these days are not true epileptiform or epileptic type seizures. They're more stress induced. People go on vacation, they don't have seizures anymore. They come back, they start having seizures again. Exercise helps these things tremendously. So exercise is critical. If I have any more on there. Feel like you have to. Some people, are guilted into exercise, and that's not necessarily the best way to go about it because it doesn't become sustainable at that point. So you got the point right there. Self-confidence as well, that's another. So we'll go ahead and talk about things that people rarely say they exercise for. And this is the way my brain thinks, but not the way most people are looking at exercise. But rarely do people say they exercise because they want to be smarter. It will absolutely make you smarter. Because they want to facilitate connections between nerve cells in the brain. I've never heard anybody say that. It does, and you'll learn down why it does. And there's study after study to show that the old opinion of the kind of dumb jock, that's just not true. People that exercise are smarter than people that don't, period, bottom line. The literature is out there to support that. So we need to make those connections in the brain. Exercise helps that. Because people want to enhance their memory, particularly as we get older, we want to do things that are going to boost the memory. So exercise is a great way to do that. Rarely do people say they want to protect brain cells and their connections against the effects of aging, prevent dementia. And Alzheimer's is a different story. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. But by and large, people can stave off or prevent other aspects of dementia by doing things, exercise being one of them. So that's just a couple of ideas. Also, too, rarely does anybody say they want to exercise because they want to ensure that newly formed nerve cells in the brain are able to survive and thrive. Exercise helps the brain create new nerve cells. Now, neurogenesis, the formation of new nerves, 10, 15 years ago was a bunch of bunk. Nobody believed that you could form new nerve cells. A lot of people still believe that, but you absolutely can. And they're formed in the part of the brain called the hippocampus, which has everything to do with learning. Now, exercise, certain types of exercise help speed up that process of creating new nerve cells. If you don't use it, you lose it. So it's important to combine exercise with cognitive activity and everything else so that once these nerve cells are created, they begin to match up with other new nerve cells. So that is just a sample of what can go on. This is pretty cool. I found this, this was written just a couple of years ago. Plato put this out on his Facebook page. And basically, in order for man to succeed in life, and you can insert whatever you like, but obviously this is the way it was written at the time, God provided man with two means, education and physical activity. Not separately, one for the soul and the other for the body, but for the two together. With these two means, man can attain perfection. So exercise and education. Back in the day, they were looking at this stuff more than they're looking at it now. So this was huge for me when I came across that one. And I did the whole Snopes and everything on it, and it checks out to be legitimate. All right. And if not, it's still true in my book. This is pretty cool stuff. I'm a big fan of origins and finding out why things came to be, even things like that, like we're talking about today. Now, if anybody's heard of Rodolfo Linnaeus, he's just an amazing, amazing mind, brilliant neuroscientist. Eye of the Vortex is an amazing book. Again, it's designed for the general population. It's heavy on content, but pretty amazing book if you want to understand how we came to think and be, and it's not the esoteric version of that. This is the scientific version of it. Very, very cool stuff. But that which we call thinking is the evolutionary internalization of movement. Most people would look at that statement and just move on. But that, in particular, to folks like me, is absolutely huge. If we don't have a need to move, we don't have a brain, period. There's a lot of research that came out, and again, this is really big. That which we call thinking is the evolutionary internalization of movement. The two are linked. A nerve cell fires the same exact way whether it's creating a thought or moving a muscle. It's just the connections that are made that talk about the differences. So, there were some studies done back in the day looking at, I'll have that up here, if you've ever heard of these studies done on the sea squirt, this little creature in the oceans that basically is born and it moves around until it finds a place to latch onto, a reef or something like that. It latches on and then it eats its own brain. It digests its own brain. This was the first evidence that if we have no need to move, we have no need for a brain. The more complex movement becomes, the more complex our brains become. That's why we have the most complex brains, because we have the most complex movements. And a lot of that was brought about by hunting and gathering, making tools, all that kind of stuff. I can get into that for days. I love that stuff. But the bottom line is movement impacts your brain in a big, big way. So thought is the internalization of movement. Again, that's sea squirt. There's a lot about that in Eye of the Vortex and some other books. Really, really cool research. If we have no need to move, we have no need for a developed nervous system. The more complex the organism's movement, the more complex the nervous system. Just talked about that, but great to reinforce that. And you'll see more and more the types of activities that are going on. Talk about complexity of movement. You go out for a run, yes, it helps the brain, but it's not incredibly complex movement. It is when you break it down compared to other beings on this planet. But you look at the things that are happening now in sports, the different types of training. Obstacle courses are the biggest thing now. If anybody's watching this, American Ninja Warrior and things like that. Most of the folks doing this type of stuff, you see different levels. You see some people that are thoroughly educated, but there are others that are really just off the streets doing this stuff. And they're doing such complex motor skills with their exercise and things they do that they have a massive advantage from a brain development perspective. So pretty cool stuff. When you combine that with the education, it's pretty much unlimited what can happen. But brain cells need two things to grow: fuel and activation. We talked about the fuel part last time. This is about the activation today, or parts of the activation. If you take away activation, nerve cells or their connections will die off. The good thing is we have a lot of connections between nerve cells, 10, 20, 30,000 connections between nerves, and we can stand to lose a few, but the more we lose, the more dysfunctional that pathway becomes. So basically, if we take away activation, eventually those connections will retract and die off. The fewer connections equals decreased, impaired, or lost function. So, many types of activation. Just throw a few things out there. What stimulates your brain? Anybody? We're sensory creatures, so we thrive on sensory input from our environment for our brain to survive and thrive. So what stimulates the brain? What are our senses? We've got sight, okay? So we've got the vision, we've got the hearing, we've got the olfactory and the taste, the smell and the taste. We've got proprioception, which basically means from within, but anything that can send something to your brain to tell what's happening in your body is proprioception. So information from joints, information from organs, that's all proprioception. Stretch within the body, that gives information to the brain so the brain can respond adequately. There's vestibular or balance. Your vestibular system is a huge sensory organ in the head and has a lot to do with your ability to maintain balance. Your inner ear canals are connected to that. Your spinal muscles are connected to that. Your eyes are connected to that. And pain and temperature as well as another. There's others, but muscle spindle cells. This has been shown through certain types of tracking or tagging with nerves. They can put a certain thing called horseradish peroxidase, and they can put it into cells in the body, and they can see where it goes. And basically, they find out muscle spindle cells. These cells are by far the greatest stimulator of brain function, and more importantly, are developed for cortical brain function. This is key when it comes to learning, because people that don't move a lot don't have very good cortical function. So we know this, we know nerve cells are by far the greatest input. So you can take away sight, sound, touch, taste, all those different things, but the feedback from muscles and joints will always be there because we're always in a gravitational field and our muscles are always being worked on by the forces of gravity. Take away any other sensation, we still have that as a baseline. And there's a lot of scientists that talk about that as being our kind of baseline level of brain activity is from those muscle spindle cells. Pretty cool stuff, because when they throw people in outer space and they don't have gravity anymore, their brains start to deteriorate at a rapid clip because they don't have a lot of activity of those muscle spindle cells. They can strap them into treadmills and do all kinds of resistive exercise, but the force of gravity is eliminated, which brings down the brain activity significantly. Extended spaceflight is incredibly limited for the human brain because we can't be out of that gravitational field for that length of time without severe consequences. So, those muscle spindle cells, let's see, we'll kind of run through some of this quick. I don't want to bore you with the science behind it. If you look at cultures where babies are restrained, you look at certain Indian cultures where babies are restrained and not allowed to go through their developmental milestones, having very high rates of autism-like disorders and things like that. It just shows you how critical movement and development of the brain is dependent on movement. So there's a lot of interesting studies done there. Spaceflight we talked about. People who are bedridden. You see people, if you've known anybody, most people have, that was in the hospital or hospice or even at home for an extended period of time without a lot of movement, their brains start to go a little bit. They start forgetting days. They start forgetting people that visited them. They forget all kinds of things. So it shows you how dependent our higher brain functions are on movement. Let's see. Okay. So, positively affecting the musculoskeletal system, things like exercise, movement, manipulation, stretching, massage, etc., will all create positive change within the nervous system. And also to all body systems, because all body systems are dependent on the master control center up there. There's individual or separate neurological control in the heart and the gut. We know this. We know people can be brain dead, yet their heart can still function, their gut can still function. But by and large, we're talking about the cognitive functions, what makes us human, are dependent on movement. This is all these things right here. This is the stuff I don't want to get too deep into. I don't want to bore you too much. But all these little letter things right here are very, very important chemicals in the body. They do some amazing things, and exercise has a very distinct impact on every one of those chemicals. So basically you have BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. What does that mean? It helps nerve cells grow and branch out. That's what it does. It's called miracle growth for the brain. That's what the scientists have called it for years. Significant increases in BDNF with any type of exercise, particularly aerobic types of cardiovascular exercise. This is vital for what we call long-term potentiation. If you don't have a lot of this BDNF, you don't get long-term, you don't get plasticity occurring in the brain. You don't get things happening. That would be learning a language, learning how to play an instrument, long-term potentiation, basically learning over time. That doesn't happen well if you don't have a lot of that chemical right there. And it's been shown that people that don't move a lot don't have a lot of that chemical on board. This insulin growth factor, or insulin-like growth factor. We know insulin has something to do with blood sugar, so why is that in the brain? It's in the brain because it has a lot to do with how sugar gets to the individual neurons and impacts their function and growth. So basically that's for fuel management. Certain types of exercise have a huge impact on that. A vascular growth factor, basically it builds the blood vessels. What do we need to get all the stuff to the muscles in our body and the nerve cells in our body? We need blood vessels. So exercise helps improve the roadways for blood. Let's see. All produced in the body and muscle and travel to the brain. That's the cool thing because these things are produced in the muscle and eventually get up to the brain, so we've got to move the muscles for that to happen. All are enhanced with aerobic activity. That's a good thing as well. Some people just like to lift weights and do nothing else. There's good benefits of resistive exercise, stronger bones, that kind of stuff, but if you want the brain to work better, you've got to do aerobic activity. And there's new science coming out about the benefits of interval training. That's all the rage now and for good reason. But interval training in particular, kind of short bursts of low-level activity, longer bursts of low-level activity and short bursts of high-level